Thank you for all the pharmaceutical and technology and investment related people who are attending today's event. I am CEO Song Kyung of NZChem Life Sciences. We're living in an era, COVID-19 pandemic era, and we're facing a great shift. And it gave us a chance to think about where we should go. And we experienced a public health system, and we're at the center of fighting the pandemic, and we learned the true power of science. Over the past 20 years, I learned that innovative vaccine can help people make breakthrough. So I learned that the corporate social responsibility and the obligation of a company. The vaccine's history in Korea begins in the 19th century, where Dr. Ji Seok-young, known as Korea's Jenner, has introduced smallpox vaccination method, and the Korea's Chosun Quarantine Station produced cholera vaccine. And in 1954, Korea enacted infectious disease prevention law. And in the past, we have been depending on importing vaccines, and we began vaccination and inoculation, and later hantavirus and hepatitis B and influenza B, among other vaccines. We began developing vaccines, and we eradicated the smallpox. So we achieved a great achievement. And during the process, Professor Yu Wang, a vaccinologist, acted as a renowned vaccine specialist. And he discovered that various viruses cause human diseases, and he developed a disease diagnosis method, and he proved that vaccines can prevent diseases, so he put efforts on commercializing vaccines from 1972 to the 94. He worked as a dean of Korea University's virus studies, so he made a leading role. And he found hepatitis B virus, and in partnership with Dr. Barry Bloomberg, he is the only one in Korea who completed step 1, 2, 3 of vaccination development. The doctor and his colleagues, Dr. Bloomberg, developed a virus detection blood test, and he developed the first hepatitis B vaccine in 1969, and in 1976, he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for the discovery of the hepatitis B virus. So Dr. Lee and Dr. Bloomberg, they have a very close characteristics. In 1976, at Korea University, Dr. Lee and his colleagues discovered a disclosing blood virus, and they collected the sample near Hantan River, so they named that virus hantavirus. There were a lot of renowned scientists who have been putting continuous efforts to find the reason of this virus. However, spearheaded by Dr. Lee, despite a lot of hurdles, they successfully found the reason, so they brought a lot of sensation to the world. In 1981, Dr. Lee and his colleagues studied mice and successfully isolated the virus from the cell and successfully produced a mass production of that virus vaccines. And in 1990, Dr. Lee and Dr. Fumiyama, through serodiagnosis, they found a way to find the virus. And in the same year, Dr. Lee's team worked on the hantavirus and announced the results of the inactivated vaccine against hemorrhagic fever with Raynaud syndrome in humans. And in 1950 to 2007, there were 1.5 million patients suffering from hemorrhagic fever, and 46,000 deaths were found. And in 1990, Green Cross produced Hantavax with Dr. Lee. So they invented Hantavax. And since the introduction of Hantavax in China, the number of HFRS patients decreased to less than 20,000. If we had not had this participation of Dr. Lee, we would not have invented this vaccine. So the doctor and Chairman He highly invested here to build a foundation and contributed to this public development of vaccine. So thanks to Chairman He Young-sup and Dr. Lee, they successfully conducted a lab test to develop a vaccine, and especially in partnership with LG Chemistries and Green Cross, they successfully developed hepatitis V virus, which was a great leap in the Korean vaccination history. This is my friend and the chief scientist, Dr. Cecil Serlinsky. He is a professor and director of National France Institution and a chief of RNA. So he has been working there for 7 years. In the early 1980s, Dr. Lee, in order to make the clinical trial be used successfully and helpfully, and they conducted ELISpot tests so we can deal with infectious diseases, including cholera, but on top of that, can also work on cancer. And with Professor Holmgren, they participated in vaccination development as well. And not only Vietnam, India, or Korean got the technology transfer. So the business mindset is a very important factor in developing vaccination. So when we scientists and business people share this vision, then they can contribute even more to the global community. Dr. John Robbins was studied in order to prevent drunk typhus. And in partnership with Professor Cecile, they worked on vaccine development. And the polysaccharide protein conjugate vaccine technology development went to further development, and thank the International Vaccine Institute transferred technology to India's company, and they got licensing. And the first Haemophilus influenza type B conjugate vaccine was developed to prevent bacterial meningitis, and it decreased hip incidence and mortality in infants by 95 to 99%, and it's used in 190 countries and saved about 7 million lives worldwide. For 45 years, Dr. Hellman participated in 45 different vaccine development programs. Among 14 recommended vaccinations, he developed a vaccine against measles, mumps, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, chickenpox, bacterial pneumonia, bacterial meningitis, and Haemophilus influenza in the U.S. And his vaccines save about 8 million lives each year, and that saved hundreds of thousands of lives from the 1957 to 1958 Asian flu pandemic. He himself was not a medical doctor. However, he kept developing vaccines. And director Anthony also saved a lot of lives. So he is one of the most popular public health figure. So Dr. Morris and Dr. Hillman developed 8 vaccines out of 14. So there is nobody who is more influential in the vaccine field in terms of developing vaccines. So scientists' vision can save millions of lives of people and cut down a lot of expenses. So the social contribution is so meaningful. And vaccine development is not an easy way. So it's a very complex path, very risky, and it takes 15 years. It needs collaboration between both the public and private, and various experts have to participate in this. Step 1 is exploratory research, which takes about 5 years. And the second step is an antibody killing bacterial. We have to prevent that, so we conduct a lab test, and also scientists have to formulate antigen, and they have to work on living bacteria or protein molecules, information having RNA or dsRNA. So the second step is non-clinical test, which takes about 2 years. For animals, the potential responses and immunogenicity, among others, are tested. And step 3 is clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Minimum 4 years to maximum 9 years. When it comes to the clinical trials, each step takes about 2 years, and you study human bodies and see if there's any side effects, etc. And if phase 1 is positive, then you move on to phase 2, and you also take a control group of risky groups, so you have more participants, some hundreds of tests, and you randomly allocate the testees. Then the next step takes dozens of thousands of people and about 5 years, and the test groups will be allocated randomly, and the vaccine's efficacy and the population, among others, are considered to see the safety. Since the population is huge, it's easy to find side effects. Step 4 is product permission. With the permission, you see if the vaccines are produced in a standard way and if they can store safety even after the clinical trial. Until people get vaccinated, there needs another year to make those stages safe. And the last stage is pharmacovigilance. So there might be some side effects that were not found during the clinical trials, so we keep monitoring them. And also, we monitor the vaccine production lines. In 1921, we began working on tuberculosis vaccine, and we have been keep working on developing various vaccines. And smallpox disappeared thanks to it, and we declared a worldwide eradication of smallpox. And in 2000, the vaccine Prevena to prevent invasive pneumococcal infection was developed, and it proved profitability of vaccine development. And in 2006, they approved human pilomavirus vaccine for teenagers, and rotavirus for infants, and herpes zoster for the elderly. And in 2010, first vaccine for the treatment of prostate cancer. And in 2013, approval of meningococcal vaccine developed with reverse vaccinology. In 2018, approval of the typhoid conjugate vaccine. And in 2020, approval of a COVID-19 vaccine utilizing new production technology in a short period of time after the release of the SARS-CoV-2 gene sequence. So we found that vaccines are really efficient in fighting off diseases. The WHO declared the COVID-19 a pandemic back in October 2020. We successfully came up they successfully came up with 12 vaccines and got emergency use listing. The background of rapid development of COVID-19 is that even before the COVID pandemic, there was SARS, MERS, among other diseases. There were accumulated research know-hows, and also the consecutive vaccine development procedures in the past. It was almost impossible to cut down the time of developing vaccines. So thanks to clinical trials and manufacturing and infrastructure, simultaneously working on them made it possible, and the public's wide attention on vaccination helped as well. And thanks to the new vaccines, we were able to develop a vaccine rapidly, and the WHO approved emergency use and emergency use listing, so various actors could develop vaccines fastly. And DNA and mRNA based vaccines were started in the early 1990s. However, they were not used until the COVID-19 pandemic. DNA and mRNA vaccines can be manufactured quickly due to the simple design and production process. And nucleic acid vaccines are considered the most innovative preventive tools in modern medicine. Pfizer and BioNTech and Moderna's vaccines are very effective, like 2 doses in 3 to 4 weeks are needed. And because mRNA is very unstable, lipid nanoparticle technology is required, and it requires special storage and transport facilities at low or cryogenic temperatures. Over the 25 years, many companies tried to come up with vaccines, but they failed. However, recently, Plasmid successfully came up. A ZyCoV-D vaccine was proven to be effective. And the world's first DNA vaccine, a large-scale placebo-controlled multi-center phase 3 clinical trial was done in India. And Pfizer and BioNTech and Moderna, they showed less than 40% efficacy. And when it comes to DNA vaccines, they're extremely stable at 25 degrees Celsius and tropical temperatures. And the expiry date is relatively longer. And if you use topical skin administration using needless air injection device, and it can prevent side effects such as pain and swelling at the injection site. And the conventional vaccines, the efficacy is less than 5 months. However, the DNA is relatively longer, and even low-income countries can't do mass production, so they can benefit from them. And variables or mutated viruses can be responded within 8 weeks. And also, technology transfer with plug-and-play technology is easy as well. And this is the status of vaccination in Korea. Over 5 million doses were injected, and Pfizer and Moderna accounted for the biggest. AstraZeneca about 15%, Janssen 1.23%, followed by Novavax and others. What matters the most is the doses vaccination rate for each stage. The first one showed 45 million, the second one 44 million. However, the third vaccination decreased to 33 million, and the fourth nosedived. So why does this vaccination rate decreasing? That is because people are worried about getting vaccinated. We studied from 2021 to 2022, and there were abnormal responses, and we showed that major abnormal responses accounting for over 18,000, and there were acute cardiac death or ischemic heart disease, stroke, pneumonia, blood poisoning, among others. So because of those side effects, citizens are worried, so they're choosing not to get vaccinated. Another reason is that they do not have trust. They don't trust the efficacy of vaccines. Even if they get vaccinated, there are still people who contracted the virus. There were breakthrough infection, and because of the short period of immunity, people have to repeatedly administer the vaccine. So, and we never know how many times you have to get vaccinated. So people say, if I'm going to get contract the virus anyway, then I'm not going to get vaccinated. And because of the trust issue and their worries, the vaccination rate is decreasing. However, the preemptive purchase of the vaccines is too much. So because of the short shelf life, a lot of vaccines are getting discarded. So far until May 2022, from 2021 February, about 3.1 million doses were discarded. But because of the pre-purchase contracts, we will have about 100 million more doses imported. So we are likely to discard even more vaccines. So that will be of loss for our finances, for the nation. And there are some tasks and challenges. First of all, we have to get rid of the public worries. So we have to relieve anxiety about vaccine side effects. And when it comes to RNA vaccine or immune boosting protein, you have to get a booster shot, but Korean citizens do not want to get booster shots nowadays, so demand is decreasing. So we need a long-term efficacy vaccines. And during the pandemic area, in order to there was a need to rapidly secure vaccines and distribute them. So the temperature is also important. And Pfizer and Moderna, they do not want to transfer their technology. But in order to eradicate the COVID, every nation should be able to produce vaccines. As of April 2022, still 40% of the entire global population haven't been vaccinated. The COVID-19 vaccine supplied to Africa for 1 year is less than the amount given to the States and EU in 1 month. And we also have to prepare for another pandemic. A very renowned vaccinologist and immunologist, Dr. Gustav Nosel, once said, "Vaccines do not save lives. Vaccination saves lives." Over the past, we have been working on vaccine development, and under the motto of coming up with innovation. So based on our innovative technology development, we have been putting efforts to be one of the top vaccine companies in Korea, and we have been working on global vaccination development, and we also have been participating in the COVID-19 vaccine project in Korea. There's Zydus in India, which is one of the top 5 pharmaceutical company in India, and there are 35 factories with 25,000 employees, and with $155 million of R&D research investment. And based on the strategic partnership, the Ansicum Life Sciences and Zydus in India signed an MOU for ZyCoV-D vaccine, which is a DNA vaccine, and we signed a contract for licensing and technology transfer. And this is the status of ZyCoV-D clinical trial and licensing. They conducted a test of 2 milligrams and 1 milligram test, followed by 3 milligram test, and we found that it showed a very high efficacy even to those ZyCoV patients, and it showed 100% safety according to the clinical trial. And it came out that it's highly effective to teenagers. So based on that, so in 2018 and 2021, we got an EUA from the Indian FDA. The ZyCoV-D, according to the clinical studies on 30,000 people, there was very low particle side effects, and there was 0 reported side effects. And the induced T cell, the antigen, lasts long, and the immunity lasts for up to 251 days, and to 2 degrees Celsius or 5 degrees Celsius, it's safe for 9 months. And even in 37 degrees Celsius, it's safe for 15 days. So even in high temperature countries, it's safe to deliver and store them. So it's highly cost effective, and needless injection can be done from high pressure technology. So it is highly efficacy, and we use plug in and play technology so that it can quickly respond to other variants, and our nanotechnology is not needed here, so we can produce it massively and rapidly. So ZyCoV is safe and efficient, and it's very convenient to use and easy to manufacture, and it can adapt to other variants. So global pharmaceutical companies, within just 1 or 2 years, the reason why they could come up with vaccines is that the fast approval. They supported 20 trillion Korean won, and also the UK supported 1 trillion won. And beginning from AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, among other global pharmaceutical companies, were able to come up with vaccines. And Ansichem Life Sciences already passed vaccines, and we got technology transfer. And not only in Korea, but other nations, 8 nations in Korea, we have licensing overseas. And from the Korean consortium, we have also built our links and capacity. And thanks to that, we will leap to a vaccine company in Korea, but also overseas as well. In order to complete our big goal, we are in a dire need to get government support. The Korean government should make a pre-purchase, and also we need financial support for our innovation, and diplomatic channel of the Korean government is also needed for us to make an overseas network. So in order for Korea to be a global hub for vaccines, those Ansichem Life Sciences, among other countries, should get supported to be a vaccine powerhouse. The COVID-19 pandemic led to we people to blossom the opportunity of using science as a solution to fight off the viruses. And the solidarity and cooperation between people worked real time, and COVAX facility, among other innovative financial measures, propelled the development of industrial partnership. In Korea from the 1990s, we have been working on training and fostering manpower and our facilities, and active investment to increase our biochemistry manufacturing capacity. So we have been spearheading the domestic vaccine market, and now Korea is recognized as one of the vaccine developed nations. And we need an open environment for vaccine trade and technology interaction. And in order to support this, we need policy measures to increase our vaccine development capacity. And Ansichem Life Sciences, among other Korean companies, should put efforts and get supported so that we can make Korea a vaccine developed nation. So in order for Korea to be a vaccine hub, I think it is a great privilege that I am able to participate in parts of that big picture. Thank you for listening.